Hello, everyone. Hi, and welcome to Alta Live. My name is Beth Spotswood. I'm the digital editor here at Alta Journal, and I am so excited to welcome you joining today's discussion on the coming war, the potential coming war on grizzly bears with the great Doug Peacock. In his latest article for Alta, Doug has contributed to the magazine several times. In his latest, Doug details the shocking slaughter of animals that occurred in Alaska last year. He argues that killing bears and wolves, predatory animals, to protect game animals doesn't work and is environmental. Reduction of him. He's a disabled veteran, filmmaker, and naturalist. Doug is the founder and president of Save the Yellowstone Grizzly. He was a Green Beret medic in Vietnam and the real-life model for Edward Abbey's George Washington Hayduke in the great book, The Monkey Wrench Gang. He is perhaps one of the most vocal advocates on behalf of the grizzly bears. And in many ways, having spent time kind of listening to his interviews and reading his work, Doug is their human voice. So we're excited and lucky to get to speak with him today. But before we do, some housekeeping. Alta, Doug's article is in this issue, and you can read it. It's called The Coming War on Grizzly Bears. Alta is a quarterly magazine focused on California and the West. We offer free weekly events like this, Alta Live, a monthly free California book club, as well as this a daily website and 4 gorgeous magazines a year. You can subscribe to us for $50 a year. You get an Alta hat, a book to at the bottom of the screen to ask questions of Doug. We're going to chat for about 30 minutes and get to as many of your questions as we can. I realize grizzly bears is a hot and really exciting, interesting topic. We'll do our best. This will be recorded and posted to altaonline.com later this afternoon. We're also going to mail you a link to, we're going to send you an email with a link to the video, a link to Doug's articles in Alta, how you can find out more information about Save the Yellowstone Grizzlies and anything else that comes up. So if you could share where you're zooming in from, it's always nice to see where our audience is zooming in from. In the chat, that would be great. I am here in Novato, California. Doug Peacock, welcome. Where are you zooming in from today?
Well, thanks, Beth. I'm zooming in from about 30 miles north of Yellowstone Park boundary, which means I get a few grizzlies wandering through here, and down the river, especially. The Yellowstone River is just less than a mile away, and I see tracks there. Sometimes in the spring, but every fall, there's a few grizzlies come up here. And
you were saying a few are out already. A few are out.
Yeah.
Exciting.
The bears are coming out. This is good timing. And male grizzlies come out of their dens first, and then mothers with cubs usually come out a little later in April. That's just a general rule. But there's a good number of solitary bears out there, and I'll bet most of them are males.
Okay, all right, noted. I want to start the way kind of you started your article, The Coming War on Grizzly Bears in Alta. Up in Alaska.
Yeah, you're cutting out on me a little bit, but I get it.
I'm sorry.
What can I just tell the story?
Yeah. What happened in Alaska?
To write this article. Well, about a year ago, to the day almost, the state of Alaska, their Department of Game and Fish, ordered its employees up in airplanes to spot and kill from helicopters every wolf and bear they saw from the air. And about 17 working days a year ago, the state of Alaska put up their planes and they shot every wolf, every bear they saw. They killed 94 grizzlies. A Alaskan brown bear and a grizzly is the same thing. 11 of them cubs. 5 wolves and 5 black bears. But, basically they shot everything they saw in a predator category from the air, and they accomplished it in less than a month. That is a slaughter. Now, the state was warned in this, the reason behind this is, this ancient myth that predators eat game animals, and the more coyotes and wolves you kill, the more deer and elk you get. And grizzlies are very in part predaceous, but it's not a big part of their diet. Mainly the bears up here eat grass and other things like that.
First of all, I apologize for any connectivity issues I'm having. I'm working on it, but we seem to have figured it out. I hope we'll do our best with the internet. How was this allowed to happen? It's shocking to hear about, and very shocking that it was state sanctioned.
Yeah. Well, I'm in Montana, and like Montana, the governor appoints a board, which a board of to oversee, their predator hunts. And this board, the governor is a 7-member board, and they're all outfitters and trophy hunters and commercial outfitters. There's not one scientist on that. They were the ones that recommended we go out and kill all these grizzlies, even though their own biologists told them that it won't do any good, because this myth of killing your predators to make more caribou calves, in the case of Alaska, it just doesn't add up. We've been doing that. I mean, it's mainly a concept from the 19th century, and it goes back 100 years, where there are good and bad animals, and the only good bear is a dead bear. And we're still dealing with that. And Alaskan, the newspapers themselves were appalled at this, but up in Alaska, but it's a difficult state. That is the politics of the state. And those are the myths that persevere. We have down here where I live in Montana, the same arrangement, a governor appointed board of, wildlife overseers that send out the rules. Fortunately, the grizzly in Montana, it's wildlife managers, like the people in Alaska, look at grizzlies and other animals as their property, and that's why they want to manage them and be able to kill them. It goes back to some prehistoric capitalist belief that you can own things like people and animals, and indeed how we treat humans, other races, other religions, other tribes, and how we treat our wildlife, I believe, draws from the same well. And that's what got me started in that business to begin with. This slaughter in Alaska was compared by an Alaska prominent journalist, and he compared it to war. And I'm just gonna see if I can find that thing. Yeah, the journalist said that they just gave him numbers of bears dead, no details, none of the suffering and the brutal, inhumane management style, that harkens back to that 19th century attitude. There was nothing of the killing itself, the terror of the animals being chased down by the helicopters, their pain and suffering, particularly those not immediately killed by their wounds. To be out there in that killing field, well, it must have been a barbaric and appalling thing to witness. War indeed seems an appropriate analogy. Of course, as a combat veteran, a disabled veteran, that really grabs my attention, because that is what probably drew me into, championing grizzly bears in the first place. it was, you know, it was comparable to my experiences in war. And I started my protective efforts to save grizzlies, much like warfare. So the journalist says the helicopters would have dropped down to hound these little bears out of the brush or down the ravines where they could be dispatched. And this is my paragraph right after. There's nothing quite so terrifying as running from a low-flying helicopter that is on your ass trying to kill you. I had my death from above moment with friendly fire in the wild central highlands of Vietnam. Compliments to the 101st Airborne. It was friendly fire, you know. You know, they chased me on a ridge, fired. Fortunately, it was not a minigun, it was just a machine gun. Put a tracer round between my legs. And, you know, I was the only, it's because I work with Native peoples, and I was the only English speaker in our little squad that walked point for the 101st Airborne. And I was the only one that spoke English. And, you know, by the time I could get a hold of the radio and scream F word stop,
Yeah.
you know, that was too much. And that night, you know, it was combat situation. I was crouched in a foxhole with my mountain yard troops who were indigenous people, not Americans or even Vietnamese. And I started to shake uncontrollably. And it went on for many, many minutes, and that had never happened to me before.
And
And this,
I mean, in the sense of the bears, having that shared re-train. That Christy asks, who is the journalist you are reading? That's like Doug Peacock. This is his article in Alta.
well,
We'll
you
send
know,
you a link to it.
I screwed up, you know, I read part of me and part of that great, I call him Sherwannock, but he works for the, you know, the Anchorage Daily News, and his name is Bill. And he was the one that pointed out that, you know, no one considered the pain and suffering and the terror associated with this slaughter. And that's
Right.
exactly what it was. And also, you know, the Alaskan biologist had advised everybody that, you know, oh, even if this aerial hunt went wrong, it would only kill max 25 grizzlies. And you can see how that's, you know, that quadrupled, you know, it was almost, it was 100 bears they killed in 17 working days. And it just shows you how easily that kind of a predator hunt, especially with no boundaries, can just soar out of hand. And of course, I'm worried about my own state of Montana, and that's why I wrote the article.
How would that be able to happen in Montana? Right now, the brown bear, the grizzly bear, is listed as an endangered species. And so because of the Endangered Species Act, it is currently illegal to shoot a brown bear in the lower 48. It's legal in Alaska, which is how this was able to happen. It is illegal in the lower 48. But as you point out, and as so much of your activism is focused on, that can change. Any of this can change, and the bear can be delisted. What would who wants the bear to be delisted, and what would it take for that to actually happen?
Presently, the grizzly bear in the lower 48 is listed as threatened on the endangered species list. And that means, you know, this, any of the 3 states that have grizzlies, mostly Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, can't legally kill a grizzly without permission from the federal government, the Fish and Wildlife Service. But all the talk right now is about delisting. The states have demanded it and filed all kinds of legal papers. The decision itself is up to Martha Williams, who is the director of the Federal Wildlife Service. And I wish I had a phone number to post up there right now, because the one thing people can do is, you know, call or email her. I've got her email, and just say, don't delist the grizzly, because she is being, the heat is on from Montana, Wyoming, and the states. And the states want to control grizzly bears. You know, they say manage, but it's control. It's really the, you know, the hidden desire. There's something ancient and a little sick about this. And if they get their way, they can do anything they want to those bears. There are 2 laws pending, for instance, in the state of Montana, passed by, you know, we've got a Trump creationist governor, and his cronies took over the legislature a couple of years later, just a couple of years ago, and you know, they hate grizzlies and they hate wolves.
Why?
And you know, that's a bedrock question, but you know, we tend to hate what we don't know. We know less and less about the wild natural world every day, and we fear that. And I think we hate what we fear. And that increasingly means, you know, my grizzlies and the rest of the natural world, especially the predators. It's not rational, but it's predominant here. And, you know, those bears don't belong to anybody, but they certainly don't belong to the state of Montana. And I want to, you know, whatever pressure or argument I can put forth before the Federal Wildlife Service to not delist a grizzly, I will. And of course, if they do, and a lot of people think they will, probably the majority of people here in Montana think they will.
Oh.
It's not good. And you know, yeah, you know, what we have done, they've delisted twice in the last 30 years. This is the 3rd time, about every 10 years. And we take them to court every time in a federal court. We've overturned it twice. You know, they delisted the grizzly and a federal judge ordered them to relist it or put it back on that endangered species list. And we'll do it again this time. But man, that's just it's a terrible route. And it's terrifying because if the state of Montana gets a hold of management for 6 months, they are certainly going to open a hunt, you know, not to kill any grizzly. And from my own experience, I don't believe you can control such a hunt.
Right. I'm curious about oh, by the way, Chris Bachman had put Martha Williams' office telephone number in the chat. I have shared that with everyone. Hopefully you all can see that if you so choose.
Give her a call and say, Martha. No.
I'm curious about the motivation. Is it in reading your work and articles about grizzly bears? It seems, my understanding is that the real culprit here is climate change. Because of climate change, the bears are not able to access the food that they've historically eaten. They are coming to lower elevations and thus interacting with ranchers and hunters. And that is
yeah, well, that's true, but climate change is the beast of our time, which is a movie that Save the Yellowstone Grizzly made, and if it's just terrifying, you know, now watching the polls, watching the fires, and especially watching the Amazon. If the Amazon goes, you know, I've chosen to save grizzlies because I ran into them in 1968 when, while recovering from a malaria attack after getting out of Vietnam in Yellowstone Park. And there happened to be grizzlies all over the place. I wasn't sure if I was hallucinating from my malaria paroxysm or if they were real or not. Well, they were real.
how close were they?
Right outside my tent because I saw their tracks. Yeah, and I was out of my head. I had a fever 105, you know, and I couldn't tell.
Is that, have you, I mean, one of the arguments you make is and AJ Arona, who is Alta's associate editor, wrote about kind of the possibility of reintroducing the grizzly bear to California. Doug, what do you think? First of all, what do you think that that's possible? And how would you feel about the grizzly coming back to California? It certainly used to be a native.
Well, look, at California was grizzly bear heaven. It wasn't Alaska, it wasn't Montana. It was California, especially, it wasn't in the High Sierra, so they were there too. But it was coastal California. There were no black bears along the Californian coast because there's so many grizzlies. And when you get excuse me, a mix like that, the black bears stay out. Grizzly bears, when they interact, they're rough on them. Sometimes they'll kill and eat them. And so, the first report of a grizzly in California was 1601, the Vizcaino, expedition. They saw just a herd of brown bears, and 40 to 60 were their estimates, feeding on a whale carcass around Monterey
Wow.
Bay and places south. Yes. And now, that's the first, and there were so many, they didn't know if they were grizzlies or not, because we hadn't named them yet, but they were, and they were all grizzlies. And that continued. I mean, California was just a Garden of Eden with its chaparral, its grasslands, and the rodentia that's out there with in the Great Valleys, and oak chaparral and marine resources, including carcasses. And the grizzly bear is very adaptive. It can live anywhere. And I see that is it AJ that wrote that?
Yeah, AJ Arona.
Yeah, okay. And his professor was Peter at Santa Barbara.
Peter Alagona, yes.
And Peter believes they can be reintroduced. He says the grizzly's like the Swiss Army knife, it can survive anywhere. And that is more or less true. And we shouldn't worry about a single, the greatest habitat requirement for grizzlies, especially the reintroduction of grizzlies, is security from human beings who account for the vast majority of mortality of grizzly bears. We kill them. And once they get close, to roads and such. But California's got places they could put those bears. They'll probably start up high. Grizzlies live, well, the grizzlies don't live at, they live now in Glacier and Yellowstone. It's not because they want to live there. They lived in the bottomlands along the rivers and the Great Plains, eating buffalo carcasses and whatnot. But it's the only thing left that, we hadn't stomped on heavily with our livestock, especially.
Well, I want to get to audience questions, of which there are many. Before we do that, I have one more question for you, Doug, from me, which is, your look like grizzlies. If we could live in harmony with grizzlies, what is Doug Peacock's vision for grizzly bears? If you could get your way, what would happen?
Well, grizzly bears aren't really a threat if you know enough about grizzlies. I've been charged 36 times by mother grizzlies. They all stopped. One of them came close enough to lean forward and appear to sniff my pant leg, but no bear has ever touched me. And the 80+%, maybe 89% are mother grizzlies, protecting their cubs. And this is absolutely true. And I've got dozens of they look like close calls, but I don't think they were. Where the human objective is to don't be a threat to the mother's cubs, and that means don't run, don't scream, and if a bear is so close to you that she starts charging, she can't stop. That old advice about playing dead is sound. A number of people have had, tried to run and didn't make it, had a bear mother paw on their shoulder. When they fought back, they got chewed on. The minute they stopped, the bear stopped, and things like that. So, even the wild, fierce grizzlies aren't much of a danger to you. But if you live outside a national park where there's bears around, it's just simple. Don't put out any bear food. And I think livestock are a special case because their lobby is so, they want, every turn. The fact is, grizzlies don't you know, grizzlies and sheep don't get along, but cattle, it's uncommon. And we have enough funds and conservation groups that'll pay for every damn cow, you know, they chew on. Most of them are actually dead cows, you know, that's how they get used to eating cows, is grizzlies smell, you know,
Oh.
one of those pits that's full of dead animals, and that's how it's all stuck. And then you got to be careful. You don't leave out dog food or bird seed or horse food, you know, you just be clean. Your garbage is really important. That's about the only, well, some people say that's the only thing that they like about us.
But so,
Or
but in your kind of perfect world, humans, grizzlies live in harmony. We stay out
you
of their way,
can.
they stay out of our way.
It's so simple, just a few simple steps, and there's no problem. The grizzlies don't go after people without something in their head that says this animal is going to kill my cub.
All right, I want to dive into some audience questions. Chris Bachman. Chris has been sharing info in the chat also. Guys, I see a lot of people sharing their suggestions for reading materials, organizations to support. Make sure you tag everyone, not just hosts and panelists, and then everyone will be able to see it. There's a little drop-down menu in your chat. I want to make sure your voices are heard, provided they are relatively kind and sane. All right, so questions. Chris asks, can you talk about the importance of connectivity corridors?
Oh, yes, absolutely. That's the one issue, you know, in federal court when we reversed the delisting call on the grizzly bear. That's what came up. The states didn't pay close enough attention to it, and uh, you know, the Yellowstone grizzly population segment is isolated physically and genetically from, say, Glacier. You know, there's maybe 6 population segments around, and, you know, only 4 or 5 of them connect. The Yellowstone grizzly doesn't. And it, even with all things going well for it, you know, it will not survive in time without connectivity across I-90. So one of Save the Yellowstone's Grizzlies project is a underpass existing that bears and moose and elk use. It's a creek, and you know, so we're trying to get the state and the Fed Department of Transportation, of course, to go after that. I know the feds would be willing, but the state of Montana is hard to push. So that's crucial, and it's also crucial. You know, we have bears. Some say they're wandering. Barry Gilbert, a great biologist, named them explorer bears, and ones that come out of, you know, say the core areas of Yellowstone and Glacier, and, you know, they end up 100 miles away. We had a grizzly out on the, you know, out on the Prairie Reserve, way down the Missouri. You know, Yellowstone grizzlies are all the way to I-90, but I-90 is just this absolute barrier, and we've got to change that. So that's another thing. But you can't kill those bears that wander, and you're finding, you know, they're going out to look for something.
Of course.
And they get killed invariably by the state game and fish, and usually it's conflicts with cows. Now, you can't do much about that, and it's not a big deal. You know, once again, Montana has passed a law which, if the bear is delisted, and only if, anybody can kill a grizzly if it's threatening a person or livestock. So that means threatening is never defined. So if you got a cow or a horse or a dog, and there's a grizzly out there, you know, they could get away with killing it. And there's you know, another law that the Montana passed, that if delisting takes place, we can't relocate grizzlies. You know, they got to be killed, I guess, in sight. You know, if the feds delist, this law will be in effect. So it's very bad.
All right. Randy asks, is there any way to redo the BLM, Bureau of Land Management, Forest Service contracts to put livestock associations, grazing, gas, mining contracts on a level playing field?
Hasn't worked so far. It's tough. Cattle are, sacred up here. And, we also have bison that should be free ranging native bison in Yellowstone Park. They stepped over that park boundary and they're likely to be executed, for the sin of not staying home. And the myth of brucellosis. Brucellosis, of course, is a disease that cows can get, but never from bears. Only in a petri dish. Only once in a petri dish have the grizzlies infected cows. However, elk do it commonly. And so, they're killing off these bison, hundreds of them, wild native bison every year. It's like the threat of if an AIDS patient leaves home, you'd kill him. I mean, that's the same sentence these buffalo get. And it's the Cattle Association is so powerful. They've been able to do that in Montana.
Oh,
The livestock.
so to answer your question, Randy, tough.
But hey, you could do it, Go ahead and chew that veggie burger all you want, It's no good for the Amazon either. They're just a worldwide.
Do you not
mess.
eat meat? Do you not eat
Oh
cow?
no, I'm not. I even hunt a little bit, but I'm aware of my trespassing, and I have my contacts. I'm about to go pick up some elk here for signing
wow.
a book.
All right, well, before we go, how about one last question before you go? CE Corngold asks, what did you think? I mean, I saw this documentary, Grizzly Man. Did you see Werner Herzog's Grizzly Man? What do you think about it? This was a documentary about
Well, you notice that I knew Timothy Treadwell.
really?
He came to me in his first year, just to get my approval. Well, I told him he was in danger a couple times a year from the time bears mate and late in the year when the salmon runs just fail. And, Aguirre, Wrath of God is one of my favorite films. So Werner Herzog. But in that film, you notice, that the camera is on Timothy Treadwell, and that's a grizzly man. And the camera would run a little too long, uncomfortable seconds. And he was setting it up. So at the end, he could say, well, I don't see no cute, nice grizzly bear. All I see is the cruel, indifferent face of nature. That was the end of the film. And he set himself up to do that. I mean, he's brilliant, but that was a cheap shot. Okay.
On Werner's part.
Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't seen it in a long time, but there you go, CE. Doug, you are such a source of knowledge and passion. And so I realize you've got elk to get and bears to save. We're so grateful to you for taking the time today. I know you've been traveling also. So to you and your wife for helping set all this up.
Technically, I'm a dunce, and you are a saint, Beth. Thank you.
Well, it's my pleasure. Folks, join us next week. We are excited to welcome author Lisa C. She is one of the authors on our brand new cover. She'll be in conversation with books editor David L. Hewlin. We will send you a link to Doug's article, AJ's article for that matter, how to save the Yellowstone grizzly, and any other information we can come up with. Again, Doug, a pleasure. Stay safe and take care.
Pleasure.
Bye, everyone.